Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we uncover what it really takes to lead change, create value, and build what's next. I'm JL Heather, here with my co host Preston Chandler. Today, together, we lead Centered, a firm that helps organizations navigate complexity, spark creativity, and unlock the full potential of their teams through innovation, coaching, and strategy. Today's guest, I'm excited about, brings a powerful mix of neuroscience, leadership strategy, and hard earned experience to the conversation about sustainable innovation. We're joined by Rachael Edmondson-Clarke, a leadership coach, speaker, and founder of Elevar. Rachel helps high impact leaders and teams unlock sustainable capacity, the kind of internal clarity, energy, and emotional regulation that drives real creativity and performance without burnout. After experiencing her own turning point as a high flying executive who collapsed from burnout, Rachel rebuilt her work around science backed tools that support both innovation and well being. She now works alongside experts like Professor Chris Beatty, applying cutting edge neurobiology to real world challenges leaders face every day. Rachel, I'm really excited to dig into this concept of sustainable innovation. I think so many people face burnout these days. It's an important conversation. So, excited to dive in. Welcome to the show.
Thank you both for having me. I am a huge fan of the show and I love what you do and the variety of guests that you have on. So it's wonderful to be this side and to be talking with you both.
It's great to
Awesome.
have you.
Well, we are incredibly happy to have you. And I'm not going to lie, I think your story is a really powerful one. This from collapse to creation. And I'm curious, maybe a good place to start. How did that moment, that time frame in your life, reframe your view of leadership and innovation?
I can remember vividly the moment that it happened that you're describing. I was in my glass fronted office. I was preparing to go into the boardroom. And instead of walking out of the office door, I found myself lying on the floor. I'd collapsed and I was staring up, looking up at the ceiling tiles. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. It was an incredibly scary and low point for me. I later realized that what I'd experienced was a panic attack. What had led me to that point had been habits that I had adopted over not just months, but years of disrespecting, my body, working harder and harder, neglecting the most important relationship in my life. And I was pretty kind of disappointed with how I had let myself get, but it felt like the only option at the time until my body literally just went, time out, that's enough.
Nah,
Yeah, yeah. And so you are asking what did that mean in terms of, for me and for my leadership. Initially, it meant that I needed to be fairly brave and admit that it couldn't go on, which meant having a very honest conversation with the CEO and the director that I was working for at the time. Ultimately, what it meant was over the coming months, we restructured the team. And I actually essentially went back into the team and we recruited for somebody to come and do the role that I had been doing. And that wasn't without its shame and its guilt. So I had this glass fronted office in what was otherwise an open plan, and I moved out of that and into the open plan office. But at the same time, I also knew that that was the right thing for me to do. And it was almost like that key moment of collapsing on the floor. And it was when I got up, actually. It's when I got up from the floor. It's like, that is enough, enough. Something has to change.
yeah.
To me, that sounds a little bit like the Peter principle, but applied a bit differently. So the traditional Peter principle is that people are promoted to their level of incompetency. But what you're describing isn't necessarily that. It's almost like people are promoted to their level of discomfort, and you're no longer comfortable, and so you don't want to move forward. I think it's incredibly inspiring to hear from you saying, I felt the discomfort, and I started to realize where I needed to be. And we often force people along this promotion path that doesn't help them fulfill themselves.
And what had happened in my instance was I had got the role and I was growing within the role, but the demands and where the business was growing quicker and faster
Yeah.
than I could grow and keep up with. And so that gap, so I'd been in the role for, sort of a good 18 months, almost 2 years, but that gap was getting wider and wider and wider. And I just, whatever I did, I just felt like I couldn't fulfill it. And I just felt like I was, like I was failing at it, I guess, really.
And it's not like you couldn't ever fulfill it. It's you were prepared in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's
And I,
always, oh, sorry,
sorry,
go
go on.
ahead. I was just gonna say it's always astonishing to me how one of the most important roles a person can fill is leadership, and it's one of the roles that we least prepare people to do.
Hugely, hugely. And at the time, I'd probably been in the world of, sort of positive psychology mindset, that practical psychology. And I kept reframing and reframing and reframing my stress, time and time and time again. And your question was, kind of what did that teach me about my leadership? Well, that that taught me in a really brutal way that you really need to be able to fill your own cup and to be able to that old analogy. I almost don't want to say it,
Right.
but put the oxygen mask. I don't want to say it, but we can't show up as the leaders that our organizations and quite frankly the world needs if we can't look after ourselves. We're not going to behave or have the creativity or the innovation or the clarity. And so instead of rest being reward, which is how I have, for so long is how I've seen it. Instead of rest being that reward, it's seeing that rest is a critical input to my clarity, my innovation, my creativity. And ignore that over a sustained amount of time at your peril.
Absolutely. And it's always, you get to that point where that burnout happens. It's a long road back, right? It took you a while to get there. It's going to take you a while to get out of it, like changing behavior, changing habits. And I know you talked a little bit about positive psychology, which I think sometimes becomes toxic positivity, where we try and reframe everything as a good thing, and that doesn't work. But that mindset only takes you so far. And one of the things we were talking about before the show was tools and frameworks. And I know you have kind of a toolbox and a set of frameworks you use to help leaders stay clear and creative under stress. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
I'd love to. I do a lot of work, as you mentioned in the introduction, with Professor Chris Beatty, who is the co-founder of an organization called CHX Performance. Now, Professor Chris Beatty, he is professor of evolutionary anthropology, neuroscience, cognition and neuroscience at Oxford and Kent universities here in the UK. And for the last 20 years, he has been studying the relationship between mood and emotion and sustainable high performance. What I want to share with listeners is a framework which he has come up with and which I have found one of the most enormously helpful frameworks in the 20 plus years that I have been, kind of involved in this world. And he calls it the 4R model. And the 4Rs are this. The first is that we must recognize that our feelings are useful signals. They're not red flags or something to be pushed to one side, but actually enormously useful signals. But we've got to be able to recognize that we are feeling something in the first place. And I say that because you might go, oh yeah, that's like dead easy to recognize that. But no, no, it's not. Sometimes the first time I realize that I'm in a mood or a bit of a funk, I've got young children, and one morning something that they do is maybe slightly funny, or it's like, oh come on, let's just get on with it. And another
Right.
morning, I snap at them, and it's almost like it can be that there is nothing between the kind of what's happening and your response to it if we haven't first picked up that and recognized that maybe we are feeling something. Recognizing feelings. So that's the first R. Can we recognize? Chris has developed some fantastic tools that, kind of help people take mood profiles in 60 seconds. But we don't always need those. It is just a matter of, let's just tune in, like, where am I at? Am I feeling something? And we can train ourselves to be better at that. So that's the first R, is to recognize. And then once we've recognized we're feeling something, what part of that is mood related and what part of that is emotion related? And I'm oversimplifying here, I know, for the point of this, but mood related, let's just call that an internal feedback loop. It's letting us know, how well restored are we? Have I slept well? Have I eaten recently? Am I hydrated? Am I too hot? Like, it's, how am I doing? How are my batteries? How well restored are my batteries? And it's recognizing how we're feeling is down to maybe some of those, all that stuff that your grandma would tell you. Eat well, sleep well, spend time with people who you care about and have your back, movement, daylight, nature, all of that stuff. So the second R would be restore, because it's our mood that needs restoring. And it's not just about getting through the next week or the weekend or the next vacation, but actually it's about, how do we integrate that restoration within our habits and within our working daily life. So that's the second R, would be restore. The third R is to do with emotion. So, if we're feeling something and we recognize, well, no, I think I'm well restored in terms of my mood. Well, we don't operate in a vacuum. So think of emotion, for simplicity's sake, as the external feedback loop. It's something or someone that has triggered us in some way. And so the third R would be to resolve. So where we've been emotionally triggered, how do we properly resolve that? If it's something, can we fix it? If it's someone, can we have the conversation? Sometimes, of course, it's a combination of those two things. The reality is we can't always resolve everything. And certainly can't always resolve or restore our mood straight away. So then we get into the territory of the fourth R, which is regulation. There's healthy ways to regulate, and then there's unhealthy and unconscious ways of regulating. So my example of working harder and harder and harder is a way of consciously regulating, and not getting back to restoration or resolution over the long term can have clinically predictive outcomes and risks in terms of our health and our performance and how we are engaging in the cultures and the cultures we are creating in a workplace.
No, I like the 4R model, and it really resonates with like emotional intelligence. And I like the idea. It made me think of a book called How Emotions Are Made. I think that's the title. I can't remember the author right now.
I think you're right.
They talk about this concept of, if you go for a walk and you're in a good mood, the sun's out, you're happy, you've slept, all that other stuff, and you're walking along the path and there's a stick lying across the path, you step over it and you move on. You reset, you same walk, but maybe it's a little bit overcast. Maybe you haven't slept very well. Maybe you're really stressed and you're walking along. That same stick all of a sudden looks like a snake and you panic. Right? This idea that your emotions are just things that happen, I think oversimplifies our relationship to our own emotions. We have some control over how they're formed. And I think that comes through in those first couple of R's, in terms of restoring, and I'm forgetting the first one now.
So
Recognize.
recognize, restore, and resolve.
Yeah. So I think, that kind of comes to life for me. So I really like the model. Maybe give us an example of how you or one of your clients have applied that model.
So there's so many ways, and I almost feel like the model helps. It's almost like an algorithm, something that you can come back to time and time again, because of course we as human beings, we are feeling things, and we are, subject to the external environment, people and things that are happening to us just right all throughout the day. And so just coming back to this and kind of going, okay, I'm feeling a bit touchy, or I'm feeling a bit stressed, or actually I'm feeling a bit upset about that thing that person said to me. Okay, how much of this is mood? How much of it is emotion? What can I do to either regulate it if I can't, restore or resolve straight away? And what might I be able to do longer term to be able to get back to those things? So it is super helpful. And I will just share a little story, because I think this fits in really nicely. So I was working with a senior leader in an organization, and he excitedly messaged me one day to go, Rachel, I get it. So he's a really keen cyclist. And he's like, I get it. He's like, so I was doing this piece and it's a big project and I needed to think really clearly and creatively about what I was doing on this project for this particular client. He said, and instead of sitting down at my desk and just like pushing through, which is what I would ordinarily do, I got my bike out and went out for an hour. I came back and that input into my work has just meant everything. And he's like, I get it. And I think sometimes, and this would be a message I'd share with listeners, sometimes it's at that point where it feels counterintuitive to take that time, that it's the most important time to take and to do, even if it's not like him an hour, but even if it's just like a walk around the block, or, you mix that up and you get that bit of restoration and, kind of get out there and do that.
I love what that tells me is it doesn't have to be complicated. It can actually be really simple in how you approach this. Now, we've talked a lot about the work you're doing. I'm curious about where you're going next. Like, what's the next challenge that you're most interested in solving, either in your own work or the organizations you serve?
Well, I think for me, the thing that I am becoming increasingly aware of is the bigger, broader context in terms of where we are at in our humanity and in our story. We have got an immense amount of change and uncertainty. And I think that is impacting leaders, not least in terms of for themselves and for their families, but also in being able to support their teams to be able to show up and perform well within that. I think it's that context that we all can feel in it, at some deep level, but then trying to map that, helping them understand and to navigate that when actually none of us know for certain or what might happen next. Finding the language and the tools for that, I think, is something that is where I'm heading next with my work.
I love it. Taking it from the individual to more of the community. I think that that's fantastic. So maybe to put a bow on the conversation and leave our listeners with something special. What's one myth about high performance or leadership that you feel like needs to be retired?
That it's all about mindset.
Yeah.
It goes back to my story, and it goes back to that unconscious regulation that I think we can easily get ourselves into the habits of. And it's really important that we pay attention to our biology as well as our psychology. And within that, I want to add, remember that we are creatures of this earth, and, time out in nature and real time with people who we love and care about and being present with them is so important.
I love it. And Rachel, if someone wants some support in their own journey using the 4 Rs or working with Elevar, what's the best way to get into contact with you?
Well, I would love to connect. If this has resonated with you, please do reach out. But LinkedIn is the best way to get hold of me.
And we'll try and put that link in the show notes. Rachel, thank you so much for the time today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I could have probably gone another hour on this. I love this sort of stuff. For everyone else who's made it all the way to the end, before you leave, first of all, leave us a 5-star rating. That helps us out a whole bunch. But maybe more importantly is if you know someone who's struggling with burnout, someone who could benefit from the message of the 4 Rs and what Rachel's talking about today, share this episode with them, introduce them to Rachel, and kind of share the wealth. And then lastly, but not least, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know what your journey with burnout has been like and what you're doing and what works for you. We'd love to hear about it. Rachel, thanks again. Everyone else, we'll see you next time on Breakthrough Innovation.
So much, guys. Thank you.